Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan and welcome to the latest episode of Into the Vault series. As you know, this is part of our entertainment show, and every week we look at a cult classic movie for each of the decades, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, and up to the present day. We look at every genre from romance to westerns to detective shows to cowboy western movies. And this week our feature is a horror movie. It goes back into the 1990s. If you have a fear of tarantulas and spiders, and this mightn't be one you might stay away from, but it's a good entertainment. It's one of the first classic spider movies. It's called Arachnophobia in 1990. It was starred Jeff Daniels, John Goodman, Julian Sands, and the main female lead of the hit movie was our guest this evening, Harley Jane Kozak, who played the role of Molly Jennings. And first of all, I was doing my research about the movie there today, Harley, and one thing that struck me was that you actually use real spiders. You actually use spiders that were brought in from New Zealand, I do believe, in bird-eating spiders and tarantula bird-eating spiders and other sort of critters as well. So it wasn't very much visual effects or 3D screens that were used back then. It was you were dealing with the real thing. So if you had a fear of spiders, whether they were vicious or not, it wasn't the place to be, I imagine.
Yes, and in fact, when I went in to meet Frank Marshall, the director, for the first time, he said, "Are you afraid of spiders?" And I thought, are you kidding me? Even if I were deathly afraid of spiders, I wouldn't admit to it because, of course, this was a big deal movie and very exciting. And I said, oh, I love spiders. And in fact, I had just done 5 years on the soaps. And so I had worked with rattlesnakes and also rats. So spiders were not a problem for me. Rodents are a problem, not spiders. But you're right, there was very little CGI or, special effects by today's standards. But we did have, along with the real spiders, we had some that were literally plastic in the later scenes when the house is overrun with them. Sorry, not to give anything away, but we also had, I think there were some animatronic spiders at one point as well.
Didn't she have some dead arachnids as well in terms of the movies? Some actual dead arachnids that were actually cast in the movie as well?
I think possibly. In my scenes, as you know, movies are shot, out of order. And so you don't always know what's going on in scenes that you're not in. For my scenes, there weren't any dead ones, but there were a good number of live ones. And what I remember most interestingly to me was that because it was a little bit cold at night, even though it's Southern California, they would have to wake up the spiders because when they get cold, they stop moving. So they would wake them up with actual handheld hair dryers. So
and you had a real life ontologist, the spider expert that was working on the show, and he made sure that none of the spiders got harmed or hurt. And even the scene where a spider was crushed, that was all sort of animated. That's not one actual spider. The spiders were treated with royalty just as much as the actors and actresses were, I hear.
Yes, I don't know if they got their own trailer as we did, but they were very well treated. And so were we. They made sure that we had plenty of preparation and tutorials on how to slowly acclimate ourselves to the feel of a spider on our skin so that we weren't just thrown into a scene and, hello, here's your co-star, start acting.
Yeah, and I suppose, Harley, for you yourself, how did the opportunity come about? You mentioned you have a vast soap background, and this was a big blockbuster movie for you. Was it a long audition process, or how did the opportunity get about for you to get cast in Arachnophobia?
I think, Jim, that it was pretty quickly after I had been in 2 movies that had just come out. I had a tiny part in When Harry Met Sally, and I had a more substantial part in Parenthood. And because these had both come out at the same time, I was suddenly on like a better list of actors than I had been previously. And so as I remember it, and I could be wrong about this, I don't think I actually auditioned. I think I went to Frank Marshall's office expecting to audition or read something, and all he wanted to do was hang out and talk with me, and I got the job. So it was one of those kind of amorphous audition experiences, but a very wonderful one, because for an actor not to have to audition is pretty fabulous. So.
And Harley, when you mentioned you landed that role going when you're meeting with the producer and the director of the movie, did you already know at that stage that Jeff Daniels and John Goodman were casting their roles?
I don't think so. I don't think I knew that at that point. I think I might have met Jeff at that point, but I don't think I knew about John until a bit later on. But and nobody, of course, knows going into a movie that it's going to be a hit movie, obviously. But I did know that Steven Spielberg was producing it. And so I knew that at the very least, it would be a really happy set with well-paid people and lots of excitement.
And I suppose in terms of horror, it's really light horror, in dare I say it. It's not really sort of violent horror. And John Goodman, his character there, Delbert McIntosh, he provides the comedy.
Oops, Jim, you froze. Sorry. Okay, I'm just going to be patient. Jim? Okay, I'm going to assume that you asked me about John Goodman being comic relief, and I'm going to assume that I'm not frozen. And I'll just tell you my take on it. I believe that there were earlier drafts of the movie where the comedy was not so much present. And then in one of the rewrites, somebody must have said, you know, we'd like to play up the humor in this. And then oh, now it says I'm the host of this. Uh-oh. Okay, so anyway, the humor came in a subsequent draft, as I recall. I think I remember reading an earlier version of the script where it was a pretty straightforward horror movie. Jim, are you there? Yes, there you are.
Yeah, I am there. Yeah. Yeah, it sort of paused for a minute, but I'm back again now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where do we pick up?
We sort of pick up, Harley, in terms of once you sort of, what was your first day on set like in terms of meeting Jeff Daniels and John Goodman, in terms of the sort of production? Was it sort of a fun sort of take in terms of the first day arriving, meeting who you were going to starring with, or was it straight down to business?
I think that I had met Jeff a little bit previously, maybe in some of the pre-production stages. I don't remember the first day on set. I think that we got to the location, which is in the fictitious name of the town is Canaima. And in real life, it's called Cambria, and it's a beautiful, tiny little town up the coast of California. I think we all got there early because actors needed to have their spider tutorials. And we got settled into our various little beach houses that they rented for us. I don't remember the first time I met Jeff. It just felt like I'd known him forever. He was already such a well-known actor. And I think John only worked for maybe a day or two. So I remember meeting John about halfway through the movie. I could be wrong about that. But that is how I remember it. And I remember being really excited to meet Julian Sands because I was a fan of his as well.
Yeah. And Harley, in terms of the start of filming on December the 4th, 1989, and it finished in April the 11th, 1990. So it was a long enough sort of shoot. I suppose it was a Steven Spielberg production. It was a massive sort of movie as well. But was that down to getting used to working with spiders? Did that take a full 2 or 3 weeks in terms of before you actually started shooting on the scenes?
No, I don't remember. I mean, it's possible. Something I've learned as I get older in this business, Jim, is that the actors are typically the last ones in and the first ones out. So when you tell me that it took that long, I'm thinking, wow, that's a really long time. I'm sure that I wasn't on the set for more than, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks. There's a lot of the big climactic scene is Jeff versus the spider. And so I know that we had all gone home, most of us at that point, and it was down to Jeff and the spider. And there was many days work of Jeff and the spider. And partly that's because the spider was played, I guess, by animatronic spiders. But anyway, all of that happened after I had left. And then I think they brought me back maybe a month later for the scene that happens as a kind of an epilogue, and then it's a funny moment at the very end. And I believe that that happened a little bit after most of the principal photography had finished.
Okay. And Harley, for you, in terms of arachnophobia, it almost feels like 2 or 3 decades later, it was a hit in the 1990s, but people are beginning to discover it again very much in the last 6 or 7 years. It's beginning to come back into norm. It's one of those hidden sort of gems that people have forgotten about with time and now are beginning to rediscover it again. It seems to be earning up in terms of when people sort of said, oh, look at this, and it's sort of a rebirth to sort of such.
You know what, Jim, I love hearing that. I was not aware of that, but I will say that it's a movie. In my career, I've done a lot of cheesy movies and a lot of movies that I don't care to revisit, right, as a viewer. But that's one that anytime it shows up on TV, I'm very happy to see it. And I'm also happy that it's having a kind of a renaissance. And I think if I were to hazard a guess, it's not merely because it was a really fun movie the first time around, but because it was one of the early movies, I think, that was a mashup of horror and comedy. I think that became more prevalent a little bit later on, but I think in 1990, it was unusual to have a movie that was crossing genres like that.
And I suppose one thing that struck me when you go in terms of spider movies, but there's been an awful lot of snakes movies, there's been movies about rats, but no one has really daunted into the spider sort of universe since Arachnophobia. So in terms of that, it's sort of, there's no sort of gauge where it stands on its own 2 feet in terms of the standard bearer.
Well, or its own 8 legs, if you will.
Its own 8 legs. And Harley, for you, in starring that big production, the few weeks afterwards, the premiere, what was that sort of like as a cast? Did you have a private screening of the movie for family, friends, loved ones? Was it an exciting time?
It was an exciting time. I don't remember particularly the premiere, but one thing I remember, I think I was on the Tonight Show as a result of that movie. I was on the Tonight Show, which was a really big deal. And I think it was because of Arachnophobia. And another thing I remember is that People magazine did a little feature, like a 1-page spread on me. And they said, do you mind if we come to your house and shoot some photos and we'll send a photographer? And I said, great. The guy showed up and he had a suitcase full of tarantulas, like real tarantulas. And he said, would you mind? And I said, well, this is kind of funny because in Arachnophobia, even though they'd given us these tutorials, my character Molly doesn't actually have spiders crawling on her. That wasn't my function in the movie. But now I had to have spiders crawling on me. I mean, I could have said no, but being a good sport, I said, sure. So there's a picture of me in People magazine from, I guess, 1990 or 91. And I have a fireplace and here's my arm on the mantle and my sleeve is rolled up and he's placed these tarantulas and they're walking towards my face and I'm smiling. And the irony to me is that in a still photo, you can't appreciate how scary that was. Also because we didn't really have tarantulas in the movie, if I recall. I could be wrong about that. I think we had wolf spiders. I don't think we had tarantulas. But anyway, he could have had plastic spiders because it was a still photograph. So you couldn't appreciate the heroism, in my opinion, of me, because they just looked like fake spiders in a still photo being placed on the actor's arm.
And Harley Jane Kozak, have you ever been to Ireland? And if so, what are your memories of your time spent here?
I am dying to go to Ireland. I've been to Scotland because I write mysteries, and there's a mystery convention every year called Bloody Scotland, and it was fantastic. And I've been many times to London, and my niece lived in Ireland for several years. So it's on my list, and I'm dying to go there. I'm dying to go there.
And I suppose Harley Jane Kozak, for the last 60 seconds, who played Molly Jennings in Arachnophobia and the hit movie 1990 alongside Jeff Daniels and John Goodman. You might enlighten our audience why they should tune in, why they should listen back and watch back Arachnophobia in our Into the Vault series, and what's in store for them.
I would say that Arachnophobia, if you're afraid of spiders, watch it with a good friend and a pillow handy to put in front of your face. And if you don't have a terrible fear of spiders, it's just a rollicking good movie.
On that note, Harley Jane Kozak, a pleasure talking to you in this week's episode Into the Vault series, where we look back at cult classic movies throughout the decades. Harley Jane Kozak played the role of Molly Jennings, the wife of Jeff Daniels' character, Dr. Ross Jennings, in Arachnophobia, the hit movie from 1990. Harley Jane Kozak, a pleasure talking to you this evening. God bless and take care.
And you too. Thank you.